Again, everybody, hello. You're here for Protecting Your Employee Assets, the Lifecycle Employment Relationship, the 2025 webinar series. This is the final series. This is number 7. It's AI at Work, Legal Issues Concerning the Use of AI in HR. And again, I'm Chuck Krugel. I'm moderator for the series. And if you want to find out more about the series itself, check out slides 6 through 8 of the PowerPoint. And check out slide 4 for our disclaimer, meaning that you can't go out and make important business decisions based on what you learned here today. This is purely informational. We're not your attorneys. You're not our clients. Likewise, we're not your advisors in this. This is, again, it's purely informational to help you get started in this topic and help build up your general knowledge so you could more credibly select and work with advisors of your own choice. As usual, or all, well, sort of as usual, our panelists today are Max Barrick, partner at the Garfinkel Law Group, Helen Black, law offices of Helen Black, and missing today is Amit Bindra, who's actually on trial. Good luck, Amit, and we hope to have you back next year. I'll be filling in somewhat for Amit today, picking up the slack relative to the panel itself. If you want to learn more about us, you can check out slides 27 through 29 of the PowerPoint. If you're attending the live premiere, you can submit questions using the web portal. If you're listening to this on demand or whatever way after the live debut, you can email info@financialpoise.com. Just include your question, the name of this webinar episode, and we'll get you an answer as soon as possible. Thanks to our sponsor, National Law Review. You can check more out about them on slides 3 and 30 of the PowerPoint. So with all that in mind, let's start off here. Helen, from a legal perspective, how much does AI impact HR management?
I think it does impact HR management. And from a legal perspective, it really is no different than any other kind of issue. If AI is going to be used, which today it's really hard to avoid using AI, people might even look up something on Google, and even just a simple Google search is now turned into generated by AI. So, if someone is going to use AI, which is inevitable, then you have to keep in mind the various laws that apply to any situation, that the information you're receiving is reliable. I think today that's even more important, to make sure that the information that AI has generated or that you generate from your Google search actually is accurate. It doesn't have a disparate impact, meaning it doesn't treat some employees differently than other employees. We know that AI hallucinates and comes up with fake information. And so we want to doubly be sure that the information is accurate, because otherwise it really will open up the employer to additional liability, either defamation claims, again disparate impact claims, and other sorts of claims if the information is inaccurate. Also, if you are using AI, you want to be making sure that you're using AI in a sense that is truthful, and we're going to get into that. So I know I mentioned that there's, information that's inaccurate on AI, like it hallucinates or deepfakes or whatnot. But oftentimes, even before this term "quote unquote" AI was coined, when we were just using the word artificial intelligence and not even the acronym AI, I know there were laws in different jurisdictions that were passed that had to do with how you're using this new technology, let's say for hiring. So if, let's say, you are going to use AI or artificial intelligence when hiring employees, in some states you might have to let them know. So for instance, if the interview is going to be conducted through artificial intelligence, in some states a person might need to sign off on it and to give authority for AI to be used in those situations. So in some states there could be certain disclosure requirements if you're using AI, based on what you're using AI for.
Nice. What other applications can you see AI getting into relative to HR?
Oh, sorry.
No, who is that?
I didn't know if you were asking a follow-up question to me, or if you're just asking in general.
Yeah, just in general, yeah. I mean, today's going to be a lot of, quite honest, I think a lot of it will be general. But go on.
I mean, just to follow up to the answer that I gave, I think you're often going to see AI being used in job, let's say, putting out, job requests, job descriptions, in the
Actually,
hiring practice,
that's an interesting
recruiting.
application is job descriptions. You
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're going to see AI, especially very, very intensive on the recruitment and hiring aspect. I think you're going to see AI writing job performances or job evaluations. And again, you have to make sure that it's accurate. You can't just, put something out there and say, hey, write X, Y, and Z for me, and then just give it to an employee. You're going to have to actually make sure that it matches what the employee does. Again, because if you use false or defamatory information, the companies can open them up to themselves up to, potential liability. Also when it comes to, let's say, workplace accidents or workers' compensation claims, social media searches, you have to make sure that at the end of the day, a person's actually evaluating the information and not just relying on what comes up in AI, which oftentimes can be inaccurate and what has been coined today hallucinate, which basically is fabricating information.
Thanks. Were you going to say something, Max? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the other thing to keep in mind is AI feels new. Like, I think to a lot of us, it feels like ChatGPT showed up a couple years ago, became a public thing, open source AI started to generate these things, and all of a sudden it's like, we're here. If you're a Terminator fan, it's Skynet time, something like that. But the reality is there have been different levels of AI that have been in use and application for some time now. If you've ever, like, car dealerships, you ever go on one of those like you go on and the chat bot pops up, or a personal injury law firm or something. Sometimes there's a human on the other side, but most of the time that's an AI chat bot that's been set up and programmed to respond to you based on answers, and it looks for certain information.
Well,
Um,
we've seen it in popular culture for decades now, going back to like 2001, A Space Odyssey movie, and or robots like Robbie the Robot in 1960s or something like that. So I mean, it's just nothing. It's just much more evolved now and
right. I mean,
available.
now it exists and has more power, but it's sort of like computers, right? So, well, computers, it's like, well, computers have been around for decades. They were just not nearly as powerful, and they filled the size
Yeah.
of a room instead of a phone that on its own is more powerful than any of them. I think, there's a lot of other places you may already see it. And this is what's given rise to a lot of the litigation over AI in a discrimination context. But, um, back to what Helen was saying, screening in an HR context, if you're interviewing a large number of applicants, it would be easy to program some sort of software on an AI basis to screen for certain information, to assign a score to an applicant based on whether they do or to what degree they meet certain criteria. So I mean, there's a lot of uses for it, but like Helen says, this isn't dry cleaning. You don't just set it and forget it. Any
Yeah.
computer or technology you implement in your business, you need to really understand what you're using. You need to really understand how it works. Not necessarily as like at the computer programmer level. No one's saying you have to be an expert in coding or making the wires connect to one another, but you do need to understand the concept of what it's doing and what information it will process and why that matters, because it's, you ever hear the mantra of like garbage in, garbage out on like different Google algorithms and things like that. You need to understand what it's doing so that you can program or use it in a way that's not going to get you in trouble and is actually going to be effective for what you're trying to accomplish.
We've talked about this throughout the entire series, the idea of due diligence, and it came up especially in the biometric, uh, like with biometric information, data gathering by businesses, where companies don't do their due diligence on in terms of what's being gathered and how it's being stored and used and all that. And it's the same with AI.
I mean, yeah. I mean, for the lawyers listening to this, I know this is not just aimed at attorneys. It's, HR professionals, lay people, business owners, all of it. So in case y'all aren't aware, attorneys have gotten into quite a bit of trouble for this. And actually,
Seems like every other week I hear a new story about attorneys using fabricated cases.
but what's funny about it to me is these are really unforced errors and they're really easily avoided. Like, if you use ChatGPT, which we're going to get into, first of all, don't use the public version if you're an attorney for anything even remotely confidential, because it's not your data. it's going to be used and uploaded to the program to teach it and help it learn. So if you're going to use it in a meaningful context, you want to make sure you are paying for the enterprise or business version that allows you to keep your data sequestered, confidential, and secure, so that if you do need to use it for confidential matters, you're not putting yourself at risk of some improper attorney-client disclosure, right? Or a 4.2 violation or something. Rule of professional conduct, although I don't think that would apply. But I'm not thinking of the rule right now. But the upshot being, these lawyers who've gotten sanctioned for like writing briefs with ChatGPT, like all you would have to do is take a few more minutes to check your sources.
Yeah.
Like these are unknowable issues. So, to me, this is less an issue of, oh my God, AI is ruining everything than it is. I mean, the environmental effects of generative AI are not good from what I understand. But this is just a case of people being sloppy and lazy, and they got caught essentially having somebody do their work wrong rather than not doing it or doing it sloppily. Like
Yeah.
the computer miscited it rather than them. And just like if a law clerk had screwed it up or their associate, they're the ones who are going to take the fall for that with the judge.
Exactly. Right. Um, Sticking with you, Max, what apps are currently being created for HR and, with AI? What are some of the products that you've seen out there or services?
Sure. So, I mean, I'll just stick with ChatGPT for a moment. Like, you can write code, you can set up other things for customer support, for setting up kind of standard processes for your organization, to set up spreadsheets to do certain items. Um, Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant have been around for years and are AI driven software and hardware, right? So, like, those already exist. Amazon has at times dickered with those things. There are different data analysis and business intelligence programs that I know to be out there. Like in the last couple of years, there was something called Power BI and Tableau, which were AI enhanced data visualization tools for business analytics. Um, Salesforce has a product, I believe, called Einstein, which is an AI powered CRM, which in theory could give you predictive sales metrics, customer service items, and all of that. For HR specifically, I've heard of things called HireVue, which can do video interviewing and candidate assessment, and Pymetrics, which uses neuroscience based games along with AI to match folks to roles. So I mean, the reality is the possibilities are pretty endless. If there's a repeatable process that could be done by a person or a computer, chances are you can probably play with AI driven software to make it do what you want, or use something that already exists to build that. It's just like Helen said, and we've all been saying, you really want to be responsible and vet what you're using and make sure you understand the consequences. Because, like, I'll give you an example. One of the first cases to touch on this, and we'll get to it again later, the iTutor case that I think I've referenced before. That was a date, like I think it was like a Chinese tutoring company was looking for English tutors and wanted to hire Americans for it. Well, the problem was is that whoever programmed it, and whether this was a decision made at the top or a bias or discrimination of one of the programmers, what happened was if you applied and you were over a certain age and you were male, I think it's like 60 if you were male or 55 if you were female, and you otherwise fit all their criteria, if you were female and of that age or male of that age, you would not get past the screening process. However, if you change just that one data point and like a Fair Housing Act like test case, and you reapply but you fudge your age to 54 or 59, suddenly the same person who just got rejected is now getting through the process. And so, different software, I don't recall off the top of my head what software they were using, if it was something proprietary to that company or something that is more mainstream here that I'm talking about, or anything else. It's really about what and how it's about how you use it more than what it is that you're using, and understanding and not misusing it.
Sure. Thanks. Um, what do you guys think about our current laws addressing AI and HR? Do you think that what we have right now is sufficient, or we're going to need some new laws?
I mean, bouncing off the case that Max just mentioned, this was before quote unquote new laws specifically addressing AI, because the principle still remains the same. The way the AI was used and manipulated, it had a disparate impact on potential candidates, right? Some went through and some didn't, just based on purely discriminatory characteristics that were automatically vetted out. And so the laws that we had in place then at the time, which are fairly similar now, directly addressed that issue. So basically you run the analysis the same way that you would any other case, just with like a new fact. Like any case is going to be very, very fact intensive. With that said, though, the different legislatures from around the country feel that we do need additional legislation because of AI specifically, and so this is all currently unfolding right now. I mean, do we need more laws? I honestly really don't know. I'm not tech savvy enough to know the intricacies to truly answer that question. But as I mentioned in the beginning when I spoke, there have been new laws because of AI. For instance, if you're going to use AI for interviewing, there's just a new law that's going to be going into effect, let's say in Illinois, that talks about, in like the healthcare industry, that you can't just rely on AI for health testing. A person has to be involved. So I guess it seems like there is a need in certain situations. And as we become more knowledgeable about the technology, probably more new laws are going to come about.
I think, yeah, I would largely echo what Helen said. At the end of the day, a, a hiring practice that creates a disparate impact or disparately treats a certain protected class of people is just that. It's just a disparate policy. And I don't know that anti-discrimination laws are inherently ill-equipped for this unless there is no way to get into the technology and understand what's being done. So I think, one area that, and I think Helen touched on this, transparency is something that I think is going to be important, so that you don't have black box formulas or processes that are unknowable that sort of throw up a roadblock to any legal remedies to illegal practices. And by that I mean you can't just have unknowable processes that are like a get out of jail free card to illegal conduct. And so I think whether you think about it as like a pay equity issue or some other transparency laws that we now have in place that require disclosures of certain information in a tech or other setting, I think that's one of the mechanisms. Um, I also think certain protections, like, I've heard of hypotheticals where like AI video software, for example, could potentially discriminate against people of a certain age or with certain disabilities. Like think of someone with cerebral palsy or has had strokes, whose face and facial features may not move um, in a more traditional way, right? Like they're just not operating like somebody who doesn't have those issues might. And there is some, and I'm not being super articulate about this, but if there's some reason why the video software might punish them for those issues, maybe you need to have alternative options available or make sure that there's a human being who's screening it or checking its work.
Could be associated with like criminal or degenerate behavior or something like that.
Yeah, or like a really good example is like think about the Fair Credit Reporting and Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. At the federal level, those are the protections for like false background check hits. If somebody's got a rough credit history, but a lot of people have the same name, maybe these are not fair hits or these
Yeah.
convictions are not truly yours. There's a reason we have mandatory disclosures for folks already in those settings so that if somebody gets a false hit on a background check or one of these credit reporting agencies is being negligent with their data or their identity, there are remedies available to people. So I think to the extent someone a lot smarter than me, I hope, can understand the technology and sort of draw those lines together of where are we going to run into issues like that, those to me would be obvious applications where we may need better laws. But I think at the end of the day, as long as the regulations, to the extent they're allowed to remain in existence, in the state and federal laws continue to keep up for interpretive reasons with the technology, relying on Congress to get its act together to do something productive that makes sense and requires real thought will not be the impediment. It's if the technology gets so far ahead and the government's recent deregulation efforts on that effort just make it impossible to break into the technology and understand what's happening, then we're going to have real issues.
By the way, here's something I heard about from a writer, an author who's an HR person, like an HR management type. She does a lot of writing. She's out of Anchorage, Alaska. Um, she was talking about employees contacting attorneys, like labor people like us, basically for representation, and they're fakes. It's a scam. And I thought I saw one of those on my own website. When people can enter like their comments or whatever on my website, or you could even send in a message to me. And I got a message from somebody, and I don't know. I mean, to me, first of all, it's an automatic. It raises a red flag when it's an employee because I don't represent employees. And second of all, they sent me this whole list of like really detailed stuff, like referencing uh, like stuff that normal people just wouldn't talk about in an email, like a pissed off employee or ex-employee just wouldn't talk about. And I just thought it was so bizarre that they'd sent this. And the only thing you could think of was that it was a fake,
Well,
because there's so many different types of fakes nowadays.
yeah, and I mean, think about it. Like bots on social media have been around for quite a while. That
Definitely is.
I don't think Elon Musk is concerned about it anymore. But there was a time that Twitter, the artist formerly known as Twitter, really policed that stuff aggressively because it could really mess with algorithms, it could mess with traffic, it could mess with elections if you weren't careful about those things. Now, you know, I think my own personal takeaway is I sort of don't trust much anymore, like that I read anywhere. Like I'm assuming most images I see that are wild probably aren't true. I assume data can be recreated. I think sometimes you can tell, like if somebody generates a document off of ChatGPT, there are certain tells if you use the software enough where you start to recognize something that's going on.
Well, bizarre, inconsistent communication patterns, or like communication patterns that are like a non sequitur, like you just don't jive with one another. But it's so micro targeted now. Like a few years ago, I remember getting emails, spam emails, like from fake business owners or people who were like phishing, with using other business owners' credentials, and those were more general. I need your help with a contract. Now there's much more specific, like my company fired me. This is my company's name, and I was doing this and this and this for them, and I think this, it's extremely detailed and it's weird.
Well, I think sometimes that is what helps me determine if something is generated through AI. It's overly verbose.
Yeah,
Every
exactly.
once in a while, I'll have a client who will send something to me, or they'll think they're helping me by starting to help write my letter for me. And I'm like, this is not how I write. This is overly wordy. I just wouldn't say it like this. And in terms of um, pictures and representations, I think that's something definitely already there is. We're seeing legislation. So, for instance, in New York, I understand that there's legislation that was passed that if you're going to use AI generated um, picture representation that is taken off of another person, you have to get that person's permission if you're going to use some kind of a representation of that individual. And so when it comes to, let's say, from an HR perspective, if you're going to put pictures up of your employees on your website or scenes from your place of employment, then you might need to get, permission to use AI generated information. Now, one thing that's interesting, and I don't know if this is necessarily because of AI, every once in a while when I'm reviewing an employment agreement, there will be language in the offer letter to the employer as part of the employment agreement that the employee agrees that the employer can use, manipulate their
Yeah,
likeness, can put information about them on their website, and essentially the employees are asking them to sign to the employer their IP rights and their own likeness, which I've always found to be a bit odd.
yeah, it is strange, but I think we're going to see that increasingly happen though too. Mhm.
I mean, I think as long as there's disclosures out there and people understand what they're signing up for, I don't know that that's that different than an employer saying like, "Can we use your pictures and marketing materials or all of that?" So, the technology changes over time. I don't think that has to be inherently scary. It's just it's getting more sophisticated and it's really
it's hard to tell. I mean, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, you used to see Photoshop images, where somebody replaces somebody's head, and it was easy to tell. I mean, it was pretty obvious. Nowadays, you're seeing. I mean, on South Park TV last week, they had that whole like AI generated video of Trump dancing naked in the desert,
No.
and it looked weird. It looked real.
I mean, that's right. Like you can tell if somebody's an 80-year-old man who's dancing naked in the desert, it's
Yeah.
probably not real. But yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. Like a lot of this stuff has become really sophisticated and scary in that vein.
Well, all right. Um, uh,
I think it's me.
Alan, were you saying something?
No, I thought
Uh,
we'll go on.
Okay. Alan, does a company, well, we were talking a little bit about this, like vetting the technologies. When they vet the technology, are there aspects other than the algorithm that they need to vet? I mean, is the algorithm the whole show when it comes to AI, or are there other aspects of the technology too that require vetting? What would those be?
Well, not being a tech person myself, this is actually a
Yeah.
very challenging question for me to answer. But what I would say is that, obviously you're going to want to run a test case of your algorithm because it does go a lot on the algorithm to see if the way it is actually being implemented is going to have a disparate impact and treat certain classes of employees different than, let's say, other classes of employees or prospective employees. So certainly, like with any technology, you're going to want to test it before you roll it out to see if it works, if it doesn't work, and if it is designed to actually effectuate what you want to do without um, discriminating against others, whether knowingly or unknowingly. And that's the hard part, is like really the disparate impact. Because certainly, I would say today, um, your average American company is not going to intentionally create. I mean, I could be wrong. I see Max shaking his head. It was
Right.
that because he thinks people are more nefarious than I am. I don't know, maybe, but I would think. Okay.
Telemarketers, the
I
telemarketing
would
industry.
hope today, with all the various laws that we have, that the average business would not be foolish enough to intentionally want to create a program that actually discriminates against a specific class of employees. I know that there have also been a lot of laws that have targeted, let's say, temporary employment agencies to root out discrimination. So, for instance, um, you have, let's say, employers contacting these temp agencies and say, well, I want, like, let's say, 5 Mexicans for this job. My staff is, let's say, mostly Latino. And so I only want to hire Mexicans. Or, this job requires heavy lifting. Just send me, men who can lift, 80 pounds. And so there have been requests like this over time that a lot of, let's say, temp agencies have been dinged for. And so similarly, you're not going to want to set your algorithms to be able to weed out these kind of individuals. So even if, let's say, a business does want this information, you have to resist that temptation. And that's probably why Max was waving his head saying, no, 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 there are nefarious people out there, because they do ask for these things, which is completely inappropriate and illegal. And so again, the same kind of things are going to apply in the AI realm, which is you can't set your algorithms or you can't set your technology to intentionally exclude or have a disparate impact on certain classes of employees.
There's demand, supply will follow. So there's it's hard to think of people intentionally creating that stuff, but I'm sure it happens in a small percentage. But I got to think that so much will be unintentional, disparate impact type stuff relative to this, and that's so misunderstood by so many HR professionals and even legal professionals too. So
Right, because you have to think about it, how did a lot of this AI come into fruition? You have advertising companies who specifically want to know who their target market is. So then they set their technology to figure out, well, who's buying this stuff? How can we now more so target women or children or whatever the case may be? So the way I think a lot of AI actually came to fruition was because it was driven by, advertising to a large extent, wanting to target certain kinds of markets. And we can't let that technology bleed into the employment sphere, in which it turns into discriminating against certain, employees. Because that's a lot of, I think, of how some of this technology actually came about, was in a way because it was targeting specific demographics.
So I'll throw this one out to you. As like a hypothetical, yeah, it's hypothetical, to an extent. You, so one of the most vexing and longest lasting job discrimination practices we've seen, and I don't want to get political about this because this it applies to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which has recently been in the news for the wrong reasons. Um, but according to BLS and almost any other credible source out there, women always earned, or at least now they're up to, I think, 82 cents on the dollar for what a man earns. Can AI help in that disparity?
Well, help how, I guess.
I
Like,
mean, reduce the disparity, get us to parity where women, and minorities are earning 100 cents on the dollar for what a white male earns.
I mean, I think I don't know. I don't know how AI is going to bridge that gap, because those are some real systemic issues, right? Like
Yeah.
in the workplace, baked in, systemic discrimination, practical issues that manifest themselves as discrimination, like women needing to take time away to raise kids or have kids and being dinged for that in ways that are sometimes or not always actionable, right? And even if it is actionable, that doesn't get you to even, it just means you've sued your employer, right? So, that doesn't mean you've bridged the gap there. So, I mean, in a perfect world, all things being equal, if everybody's using the software the same way and it can be used to even the playing field, sure. Practically speaking, I think, no one piece of technology is ever going to bridge that gap unless you start using it to basically come up with ways to bridge those inequities on a company by company basis, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem that's, like you said, it's baked into our society. And if the data entering the AI algorithms is based on that discriminatory, compensation, that whatever you want, whether it's disparate impact, differential treatment, or whatever, and the algorithm picks up on that, all that's going to happen is it's going to continue that disparity.
But I mean, I don't know that that's an AI thing. I think that's just an anti-discrimination law thing, right? Like AI, if a company does something improper and it's been doing it that way, like I'll give you an example. One of the first cases I worked on as a baby lawyer was a class gender case against a government contracted shipbuilder up and down the eastern seaboard. Very, very well known, I think publicly traded company, data security now too. And what was going on there, and I don't think it was written anywhere if memory serves, it was just sort of how things worked. The labor force was mostly African American across the board. So there wasn't a racial component. It really was a truly gender specific case. Two people go out for a job at that company to work in some form of labor or trade building government contracted ships. And you can go one of two routes. You can either be assigned as a general laborer, so you're not picking up a trade or a skill. You're just being funneled as a general laborer to wherever there's need. Or you get funneled into one of the many trade shops, painting, pipe fitting or joint fitting, electrical, carpentry, sheet metal, welding, whatever. What would happen there was, and the only way to really move up on the factory side or on the plant side was to be a tradesman. You weren't going to get to the top of team lead management or anything else if you were just a general laborer, because at the end of the day you could never run a crew because you didn't have a skill set. Well, what happened was, if you were a man and you came out, 9 times out of 10, unless there's something problematic, you're getting funneled into one of the trade spots. And this is a union job too. If you were female, it was not a written policy. You just got sent straight to the labor side. There was no discussion. You were just a laborer. And so you had this situation where women literally never became supervisors at this place, not because of a written policy. And I can't really think of how AI would have fixed that, because I remember the Discovery and they had plenty of anti-bias training. They had plenty of theoretical existing mechanisms. They just didn't use them. For whatever reason, somewhere along the way, the culture turned into this, and that's just what happened. And so would AI fix that? I don't know how, because you didn't need a computer to tell you this disparity existed. We needed a statistical expert, but it wasn't hard to see it. There just were no female supervisors, full stop, and almost no women in the labor side or on the trade side. So I don't know. Like, I think at the end of the day, we have some theoretically usable discrimination laws that exist to police these things. We just need a court system and what have you that's not hostile to it, There may be some technological tweaks required around the edges. Um, but I think for the most part, that's not the kind of thing that's going to fix those issues. Uh, Enforcement of our laws will fix those issues.
Hey, thanks. Um, what about the idea, I'll pose this to both of you too, the idea that a company like basically gives out its whole HR function, recruitment and hiring and all that to a company, that a third party company, or just its own internal AI program. So I mean, there's companies like Workday, whatever, that are using AI, and then maybe some company develops its own thing in house for doing the same function. I mean, could that absolve them from liability or anything like that? Because I mean,
You get Hal to if somebody
it's,
goes to harass, it's sorry, I can't let you do that, Michael.
yeah.
Go ahead, Dawn. I'm sorry, I'm derailing us with nonsense.
No, I didn't say anything. I was listening. I was listening, and
Yeah, I'm being silly. No, I mean, look, think about it like a PEO, right? Like if you hire a
Well,
professional
exactly.
employment
Yeah.
organization or a third-party benefits provider to manage your FMLA leave and they screw it up, or you end up firing a workers' comp employee in a state that prohibits it, which I think most of them, as an exception at will, right? Workers' comp retaliatory discharge because the algorithm screwed it up or the PEO got its wires crossed with your HR department. You're not off the hook because somebody like that's not a panacea. You're still screwed if you break the law. I mean, not screwed, but you're still going to face consequences potentially if you break the law, whether somebody does it as an authorized agent to do it for you, or that authorized agent is a computer that's been programmed inadvertently in a way that discriminates. Like you're still on the hook come hell or high water.
Yeah. There's
there
no,
might be some yeah, and also you're going to have to get certain disclosures in certain states if you
yeah.
are using certain kinds of technology in the hiring and in the recruiting process.
I believe that a company can only absolve itself of liability through contract when it comes outsourcing HR stuff. So if you outsource HR stuff and you've contracted for the company, the PEO or the third party administrator to pick up liability or to pick up your liability, then it can be done that way. But it's got to be explicitly agreed to. And I guess the other end of the two would be insurance. I mean, if you you may have employment practice and liability insurance that covers you through, discrimination, harassment, liability and stuff. Although it would be different for wage and hour cases because most EPLI policies don't cover wage and hour, or it's like a separate, very expensive rider to the policy, to the core
Yeah,
policy.
I mean, I could start to see. I mean, one thing I could envision in the future is exclusions or riders that you have to purchase or work around if you're going to use AI in certain ways, right? Like, I could think of a common carrier, like, and I know this isn't employment, but these self-driving taxis that keep getting vandalized and lit on fire in California or LA, like that maybe some auto carriers will not insure them because their accident rate or their destruction rate is so high. And so until people stop blowing them up because they're laying outside their house honking at them for no reason at 4 a.m, like leading to people getting angry and just setting them on fire. Like, it may be that companies are discouraged from doing certain things because they're not insurable. And I found that when you want to get societal change, if you can't get it through the law, lawsuits have an amazing way, especially when there's not coverage, of changing people's behavior, whether with cigarettes or guns or some other toxic tort. Like, amazing how quickly companies will shift when it becomes uninsurable and you're going to face billions in liability for something. So I think, there are other mechanisms that exist for dealing with these items depending on where the issues arise.
Right. Um, what do you think of will AI be able to help us in terms of recruitment or employee assessment and these various HR functions that we've been talking about? I mean, I know it's a tool, but can they really? I mean, you said it. I think one of you said it before, like it may be you, Max, like where AI helps us create code. It writes code for us. I mean, can it actually create for us a foolproof or almost foolproof way of hiring people to eliminate bias, discrimination?
I don't, I mean, no is the short answer because I don't, maybe somebody out there disagrees with me, but none of us are truly nobody exists in a vacuum, right? We weren't just hatched or we weren't just removed from plastic, right? Like we've all grown up, we all have our own biases. None of us are immune to that. And even if you think you're the most anti-racist, anti-everything person, that unto itself has your own viewpoints baked into it. I say that to say whatever program you write, it could be as apolitical, a everything as you want. At the end of the day, it's still your view of what's correct. And I think that's one of the reasons Amazon at some point abandoned that stuff. It was either in a hiring or HR context, I forget which. They just walked away because I think they came to the conclusion that there was no way to do it without some bias motivating what was happening. And there was no, they, I think, had determined there was no way to do what they were doing without some inadvertent disparate impact on some group
Yeah.
based on who set the program. So long answer to your short question is probably not. I think you can use it to screen for that stuff and say review my X, Y, or Z evaluation and tell me where there are biases that could appear if you are truly conscientious about it. But you know, like even if you use like enterprise chat GPT, you have to manually tell it like answer this question, but do so without, I forget what the language we use, but it's like, do not consider something to the effect of like, don't consider anything I've ever asked you before. Because the algorithm is written in such a way, as I understand it, to give you an answer it thinks will make you pleased with it. And so if you want it to not do that and you want it to be as neutral as possible, you're basically having to tell it, forget anything I've ever told you about me and just look at this blank. And like, you know, there's always going to be error in things. So, I mean, you can
Because even if you look at a blank, it all depends on what data is loaded into that, into those algorithms, or what data sets these algorithms have, access they have.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if this is specifically AI, because I feel like this is technology we've had for quite some time before the term AI was coined, which is, and Chuck, you alluded to this a little bit earlier. Companies of, let's say, 100 or more employees do have to submit every year their what's called EEO disclosures, their equal employment disclosures, to the EEOC and to perhaps other government agencies about data on how many people they have in different types of classes, whether it be women, this, that, whatnot. And so I could see that just data can be analyzed better to maybe determine, or faster, in what departments are we lacking, in what departments perhaps we certain people are earning a certain amount, and maybe that has a disparate impact on, let's say, women, because women still often do earn less than men, and then look at why. And I think AI can be used to perhaps better analyze data. But I don't know if this technology is any different from anything else we've been able to do for the last, let's say, 20 or so years. I think it just might be more advanced.
It's faster. I mean, it's a much faster way of and easier
Faster,
way of
advanced,
analyzing the data.
yes. But it's still not foolproof. Like, we've seen, you still need a human to look over it and to think about it, and to see if what was actually programmed into the technology is accurate. Because my very limited understanding of AI is it basically calls anything and everything out there. And if anything and everything out there has some wrong data points in it, you're going to get wrong information, just like this hallucination of cases that we see consistently, that a lot of lawyers around the country have been dinged when submitting legal briefs to the court and actually citing fake cases that are just made up. What we
And
call
there's
hallucinating.
and there's disparities in the data sets, because I mean, you look at something like Lexis or Westlaw, which are probably the most commonly used legal databases, and I don't think you're going to get hallucinations from those, because they're using active reported cases.
You do. I mean, not in the same way. I mean, so we beta tested and now still employ Westlaw's AI function. And I think you want to think about like AI taking people's jobs. That's an area where I actually can see it, which is like the first year associate at the big law firm who made his bones or her bones or their bones, if you will, doing research memoranda while chained to a desk. That's not a necessary job function with these items now available. I mean, it's not perfect, and I think terms and conditions searches for the lawyers on the call are still more effective. But like then if you go do that and then you go run an AI search, it will give you a research memo But if you don't ask the question the right way, it's not going to hallucinate cases, but you'll get the incorrect answer from it.
Yeah, it's gonna basically
You'll draw the wrong conclusion from
yeah,
it.
it'll pervert the issue itself that you're researching. It's gonna basically stretch it into other areas,
Yeah, you need
that
to
are
read the table of
irrelevant.
goals. It's a nice starting point or a confirmation of what you think you know and want to confirm. But like everything else, I guess this is comforting depending on how you look at it. The AI is not infallible. Just because it's a
Yeah,
computer doesn't make it perfect. So we're all still necessary. We may be less necessary at certain jobs, but typewriters aren't necessary anymore. Typewriter repair people are not necessary anymore. That doesn't mean people don't still word process. It just means it's now done more efficiently by a better device for it. So I mean, I think that's a way to think about it.
well, so I used to subscribe to Westlaw years ago, and now I subscribe to Lexis. I
Great.
subscribed to Westlaw when AI was first coming on board with legal, not just research, but legal writing. And now, and I think you're right, Max. And I think there's a dichotomy between using AI in legal research and using any sort of AI for writing, legal writing, or any sort of writing, or what's broadly called generative AI, as opposed to HI for research, which is a different sort of AI itself. So, I mean, I don't think you're going to get much hallucination relative to the research itself. And I haven't used Lexis's generative HI because I'm frankly kind of scared of the generative stuff for what we're talking about. It seems to me I have to voice the work. So, so it's got to write it, and it's not going to write it in my voice probably. And then I got to then I got to verify what it's written.
I mean, we've got a program we're using right now that is designed for plaintiffs' lawyers. And like they're pretty clear. It's called Eve, EVE. And it's not perfect. They'll tell you it's not gonna do everything, but it will save you quite a bit of time. Like if you think about it as a time saver, it's perfect. Because if you give it, for example, like you got to you're in a discovery fight with an opponent, you got to send them a letter. If you upload a couple examples, then it learns how to draft a blueprint based on what you've given it. You ask it, it'll give you upload files to a matter, you then give it instructions on what you want it to focus on or do, and it gives it to you. And then it says, do you want me to change this? It generates likely questions or helpful questions you might have, or you give it your own. So like, yeah, and it can do research. It's not perfect, but it's like,
That there's the
think of it as
distinction,
a
though.
time saver.
Yeah, well, I think there's a distinction, though, you implied there. Research versus just general letter writing or correspondence between parties or clients. I mean, you may not need to do original research for that and generate, case summaries or blurbs or something like that. Whereas, like with actual research, that's to some extent that is what you're doing. And I think that's where the hallucinations and the issues with AI really come into play.
I
Is,
think
is more
issues
in
come
that
into
regard.
play with anybody who's not going to check their work,
Well,
whether you're
lazy,
getting it
yeah.
from AI or because you don't ask your law clerk to check their work or you didn't check the law clerk's work. Like whether it's the computer that did it, your associate or your legal assistant who did it, or you who did it. A court is going to look at you the same way, no matter what back office source screwed up the citation. It's your head on the chopping block. So always, I think the takeaway is no matter whether you use AI or anything else, check your freaking work. Like I don't know a better
Well,
way to say it.
I mean, maybe I watch too much TV, but I think I'm like
Can't speak for others.
inundated by prescription drug commercials. And and it seems like, wow, I really should be taking all these things. My life would be so much better. But yet, when you start reading the fine print, and then you hear about all the list of all the side effects, it's like, holy smokes! So it's the same principle with AI. I mean, do your research and due diligence on this stuff, and figure out, what the differences or distinctions are relative to generative AI and for HR management, disparate impact and all that, and for the research you're doing. So.
Yeah, agreed.
Um, so now let's throw in this one. I mentioned Workday earlier as an HR app that uses AI. Recently, there was class action status certified for the case of Mobley versus Workday. We were just talking about that earlier, out of Northern District of California. So, I mean, this is the age discrimination matter. And this could potentially, because Workday is like national with thousands of employees, or I mean, not are thousands of applicants or companies using it to process applicants. I mean, we're talking about a ton of money here, as much as anything that was with the like the onset of the biometric information uh, litigation. So, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, we're especially with a mainstream company like Workday. Not getting into specifics of Workday, by the way.
No. I mean, candidly, I've never used it. I mean, I think this goes back to before, I think Helen's right. A company, at least of this size and sophistication, is likely not going to go into this deliberately intending to discriminate against large swaths of the population based on what I understand the allegations in that case to be. You'd be bonkers. Okay, maybe Joe's Auto Shop does it, right? But not Workday. But that doesn't mean, to one of your earlier questions, Chuck, that doesn't mean they're not culpable necessarily. Like there may be implicit biases that are leading to these disparate impacts in how the software is configured. And so I think, whether it's something more deliberate, like in the iTutor case, or whether it's, simple, not incompetence, but just human error that's leading to these outcomes, this speaks to the danger of any technology that's not managed correctly when it implicates possible discrimination.
But like 30 years ago, before the onset of a lot of this technology, creating a class action lawsuit, like to jump through all the hoops. And I'm not even talking about the legal hoops like that a judge might put you through, but just all the like the logistical issues that arise, like contacting people and finding out if what they were doing, like if what the position, a job they did is within the class, just definitions, things like that. I mean, all that should be able to be resolved pretty quickly, I think, with AI, because you have all that data for these different pools of people, like with Mobley or the iTutor. I would think it'd be easier to gather all that data, and for plaintiffs' attorneys, this has to be a real, a gold mine.
I mean, it's not just that though, right? Because it's all the technology. Search engine optimization is not new, but I think there are AI components to that as well. So by that I mean, in other words, when somebody Googles certain words or searches them
They
on
use algorithms,
up at the top, or like you're talking about it, you see all these ads that are targeted to you for prescription drugs, maybe on YouTube, maybe somewhere else. Like, sophisticated plaintiffs lawyers nowadays, you go back, class action waivers and mandatory arbitration, which I think we talked about in past webinars, were the mechanism that the management side and companies used to combat class actions brought against them, right?
Yeah,
So the plaintiffs bar and the internet have democratized that some and made that a less useful weapon because someone like me can employ a sophisticated web function and find hundreds of plaintiffs very, very easily. I did it in a
exactly.
club case at a court order this year. And because I had zip codes, it was disturbingly accurate how quickly I could find people who I did not have addresses or even real names for. I had
Exactly.
stripper names. So it's like, and there are other mechanisms the management side is now trying to employ to fight back on that. But it's just
Well,
gonna be an arms race, I guess, in that vein.
yeah, I don't see those tactics or what the management's doing. I mean, they can't use the
Paying.
traditional. What?
They're just not paying the arbitration bills and trying to stall it out that way. When I
Yeah, but you can't, and you can't use the traditional defense of like, well, these people are all doing unique jobs or blah blah blah. I mean, the AI can can ferret it out for you and basically tell you if they're just doing significantly similar or si- similar enough jobs for the purposes of of a wage an hour or any sort of class action relief.
And there's already discovery softwares that exist that have AI functions that can do this stuff too, that can OCR, make documents text readable, that can look for certain criteria in them, that can look for similarities, that can tag them so that when you look for certain tags or labels that you've affixed to certain types of documents, you'll get a selection of them and all of it. So I think, if you know how to wield the technology, and the rules of professional ethics for lawyers at least require, like, you are not allowed to put your fingers in your ears and pretend that you just don't know what the technology is. You have a duty to at least understand it and not put your client at a disadvantage, right? So you at least need to know what these things are. but I would encourage folks not to be like terrified of it just because it sounds scary. At the end of the day, it's all technology you've probably used without knowing it. If you've ever used Alexa or Google or something like that, it's just in a more sophisticated context. But like I said at the beginning, disparate treatment or disparate impact is just that. It's just a policy that is hurting a group of people deliberately or inadvertently. It's just a question of
A neutrally, yeah, a facially neutral policy.
how-
On the surface seems like it's neutral, but yeah, it doesn't. It's clearly malignant.
whether it's because the computer is screening for people that look or are of a certain group, or a human being is doing it, doesn't really matter. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. And if you think about it that way, it's not that different.
By the way, and I don't mean, hopefully nothing of what I said like in the last hour comes across as being cynical, but I truly think that AI is really the future of like business in general. I mean, it's been the future of law, and the component of my law practice for the last couple of years now, few years now. So, I
Not
mean,
going
to me,
away.
yeah,
It's
well, it's to our advantage. It works. I mean, there's aspects of the user right. It works.
I mean, Microsoft has a great, I mean, one of the questions, I don't think we got to it, was like, well, what are you using yourselves right now? Like Microsoft has awesome tools for this right now. And you can run your entire practice out of Microsoft now if you want to, because of the AI kind of integrations that you have. You can, I mean, there are softwares you can transcribe your phone calls. You can do that with Google Meets now. Like these things can be really helpful if you wield them without breaking the law.
Google Mail gives me AI summaries of all my emails at the top of the email.
Got an
It-
iPhone? That's how you get
it-
your
yeah,
transcriptions now, like what's being said, summarizing a call, like
Google's always trying to write my emails for me now too, which gets a little annoying. But sometimes it's useful. What?
I'm
Sorry.
just making dumb jokes,
Oh.
Chuck. Sorry, I can't
No,
help
but I mean, but yeah, I mean, I use Google and Gemini. Gemini is part of Google, or is Google's the name for AI. And then Lexis has been, their AI has been really cool. I mean, because at least on the research side, I mean, it's just speed of light research. It's just so quick and simple research. I mean, there's site checking everything. It's just so much. It's elegant. Even you, I'm hopefully Pacer will start picking up some AI stuff.
I don't know, man. Pacer's pretty antiquated. It's got a ways to go. It's
It's still more useful though than Illinois' system. It's better in Illinois' electronic filing system. So,
it is, sir.
all right. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Any final thoughts from either of you?
Well, you guys mentioned about AI writing your emails or whatnot. It tries with mine, and oftentimes I find that I just have to stop it and write what I want to say because it just is not
It's a little
there
annoying.
yet. I don't know what it
Yeah.
is. It hasn't been able to exactly mimic my brain yet.
My only takeaway is thank you, Chuck, for having us again this year. This was a lot of fun, and thanks to the folks at Financial Poise and to everybody listening. It's been a fun year, and always get to learn something on these calls and have robust discussions. So it's been a blast, and I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Ditto, Max. Thank you. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. We'll see
Amit,
what next year
thank you
brings.
too. And yes, we'll see you all next year. Hopefully. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the summer.
Thank you. You
Thanks,
too.
Chuck.
Bye.